Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're unpacking a seriously fascinating chapter of history. We're looking at the period between the 3rd and 6th centuries CE to investigate exactly why the Gupta Empire is celebrated by historians as India's classical age. We're going to dive deep into an era of just tireless creativity, massive empires, and incredible scientific advancements that, honestly, still echo into our modern world.
Think about this for a second. If you leave a standard bicycle out in the rain for, say, just 1 year, it's going to show massive signs of rust and decay, right? Well, picture a massive 6-ton iron pillar forged over 1,600 years ago. It sits right in the middle of modern-day Delhi, completely exposed to the open sky, subjected to centuries of intense heat, humidity, and those torrential monsoons, and yet it simply refuses to rust. It's this towering physical testament to the remarkably advanced skills of ancient India. And in this chapter, we're going to uncover exactly how they achieved something so seemingly impossible. So to figure out how they pulled that off and so much more, we're breaking this chapter down into 6 parts. 1. The Classical Age. 2. Marvels of Ancient Science. 3. Society through a Traveler. 4. Governance and Grand Alliances. 5. A Golden Age of Art. And finally 6. The Gupta Legacy.
Let's start with Section 1, the Classical Age, setting the scene. To really grasp the significance of this chapter, we first have to look at the vibrant, diverse world these folks actually inhabited.
If you look at the Indian subcontinent between the 3rd and 6th centuries, it was, well, a pretty active landscape politically. The Gupta Empire, headquartered in Pataliputra, which is modern-day Patna, is the star of our chapter, but they definitely weren't the only players on the board. You had the formidable Vakatakas ruling the central regions, the Pallavas looting power down south, and way up in parts of modern-day Assam, the Kamarupa kingdom was thriving. These were all powerful kingdoms in their own right, but it was the Guptas who ultimately sparked this unprecedented cultural and scientific explosion that would come to define the entire era.
And that political stability really paved the way for Section 2, Marvels of Ancient Science, the rust-free mystery. Let's circle back to that 6-ton, 1,600-year-old pillar. Modern scientists have actually rigged up rigorous tests on this marvel and finally cracked its secret. It survives because these ancient metallurgists had a highly advanced understanding of chemistry on practically a molecular level. I mean, way before modern laboratories were even a thought. They deliberately chose a specific, high-phosphorus iron because they knew it would react with oxygen in the air to form this unique, ultra-thin protective layer on the surface. So they weren't just banging on hot metal with hammers. They were actively mastering the complex chemical properties of the Earth to create a self-healing shield against corrosion.
But their scientific genius definitely didn't stop at just manipulating metals. They also heavily engaged in codification. Now, to be codified just means to arrange or write something down in a super-organized, highly systematic way. And during the Gupta era, they took this rigorous, scientific organization and applied it directly to human biology and health.
The crucial point to take away here is that this specific chapter in history saw the strict codification of Ayurveda. Its roots go back much further, sure, but it was right here that encyclopedic texts like the Charaka and Sushruta Samhitas were compiled into their definitive shapes. Imagine walking into a clinic 16 centuries ago. You wouldn't just be handed a random remedy. A physician would systematically diagnose your specific disease from a cataloged list. They could even perform complex advanced surgical techniques. They'd map out a precise diet for your recovery, all while operating on the philosophy that there's this deep, unbreakable connection between your mind, your physical body, and the natural world. They basically established holistic medical practices that are literally still in use today.
Okay, but science and medicine are really only half the story here. Let's look at the human element in Section 3, Society through a Traveler, Historiography in Action.
To truly understand what daily life felt like on the ground, we can turn to the incredible travel diary of Foxian. He was this deeply devoted Chinese Buddhist monk who braved treacherous mountains and vast deserts, walking thousands of miles just to reach the Gupta Empire to find authentic texts. When he finally got there, his accounts painted this glowing, almost utopian picture. He wrote, "The people are numerous and happy. The inhabitants are rich, prosperous, and practice kindness." He was just blown away by how wealthy merchant families established these grand houses for charity, where the poor, the orphan, and the sick were given free doctors and free medicine. He even mentioned, with some surprise, that the city lanes were pristine and citizens didn't even have to register their households.
But, and this brilliantly illustrates why we have to analyze historical sources critically, Foxian's accounts focus heavily on the spectacular wealth of the merchants and the undeniably happy urban citizens. If you read between the lines, though, he briefly reveals a much darker, hidden reality.
He mentions the harsh exclusionary treatment of the Changdalas. These were a marginalized group treated as outcasts, forced to live completely outside the city limits, entirely separated from that utopian wealth and free medicine he praised so highly. Faxian's narrative reflects the very limited, privileged portion of society he interacted with. It's a profound lesson in studying any chapter of history. You absolutely must seek out multiple perspectives to uncover the full, complicated tapestry of a civilization.
So how exactly do you maintain order over a society that is so vast, complex, and clearly divided? We find out in Section 4, Governance and Grand Alliances, Power and Strategy. Maintaining an empire of this sheer size was a monumental, frankly terrifying logistical task. Try to vividly imagine moving an entire ancient army. We're talking thousands of foot soldiers, cavalry, and massive war elephants. By the way, a single war elephant eats hundreds of pounds of food every single day. Now imagine an army of them on the march without modern communication, paved highways, or motorized transport. To manage this masterpiece of administration, the Gupta kings relied on a vast network of tributary kings for constant supplies. They cemented their immense power through a carefully balanced mix of aggressive military conquests, sharp diplomacy, and highly strategic matrimonial alliances, like the famous regent-ruler Prabhavati Gupta, whose marriage acted as a vital bridge to solidify control across huge regions.
It's actually kind of fascinating. You can trace their growing dominance, and honestly perhaps their rapidly expanding egos, right through the historical record on their coins and public inscriptions. Earlier rulers were generally content with pretty straightforward titles like Rajan or Maharaja, which just meant king or great king. But the Gupta rulers? Oh, they took it to an entirely different level. They started adopting these massive, sweeping, divine-sounding titles like Maharaja di Raja and Chakravartin, meaning the Supreme King of Kings or Universal Ruler. They were sending a very clear, highly intimidating message of unrivaled authority to every single person living within their domain. All of this immense power and consolidated wealth ultimately culminated in what we cover in Section 5, a golden age of art, vibrant creativity.
Because the Guptas established such secure political power and a booming economy, it freed up a massive amount of resources to support a staggering cultural renaissance. And what's truly remarkable about this chapter is their inclusivity. The Gupta rulers were deeply devout followers of Vishnu themselves, yet they generously and enthusiastically patronized other philosophical traditions. They poured wealth into massive Buddhist institutions, carving incredibly beautiful, intricate monasteries right into the solid rock faces at the Ajanta caves, and heavily funded the renowned Nalanda University, which became a global beacon of learning. It was this remarkably open approach that fostered an environment where highly diverse art, architecture, and religious thought could thrive side by side.
This stability also paved the way for a peak era of exquisite Sanskrit literature. Take Kalidasa, for example, widely considered one of the absolute greatest poets of the time. He gifted history with masterpieces like Meghadutam or The Cloud Messenger. It's a beautifully emotional poem about a minor deity who gets tragically banished from his home. Lonely and desperate, he looks up at the sky and begs a passing rain cloud to act as his messenger, carrying his words of profound love across the continent to his distant wife. It perfectly captures the deep emotional resonance and the vibrant creativity that totally define the period.
Which brings us to the conclusion of this chapter, Section 6, The Gupta Legacy, Foundations of the Future. As we pull all these distinct threads together, the sheer scale of their collective achievements makes it completely undeniable why historians officially call this India's classical age. They successfully engineered a prolonged period of unprecedented peace. Because they weren't constantly fighting just to survive, brilliant minds had the time to look up at the stars and record groundbreaking advancements in math and astronomy. Medicine and complex metallurgy were systematically consolidated. Breathtaking Sanskrit literature and monumental architectural art hit an absolute peak. And their sophisticated blend of military might and diplomacy set a governance model that future rulers would emulate for centuries. It was, quite simply, a massive, brilliant synthesis of human achievement.
So as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a provocative thought to ponder today. Knowing exactly how the Gupta Empire defined their era through incredible, lasting advancements in science, magnificent art, and complex societal structures. If future historians were to dig up our cities and analyze us 1,600 years from now, what lasting achievements will define our classical age? Think about that. Thank you so much for joining me to unpack this chapter and keep questioning history.